48 Laws of Power, Chapter 43. Work on the hearts and minds of others. Coercion creates a reaction that will eventually work against you. You must seduce others into wanting to move in your direction. A person you have seduced becomes your loyal pawn. And the way to seduce others is to operate on their individual psychologies and weaknesses. Soften up the resistant by working on their emotions, playing on what they hold dear and what they fear. Ignore the hearts and minds of others, and they will grow to hate you. Near the end of the reign of Louis XV, all of France seemed desperate for change. When the king's grandson and chosen successor, the future Louis XVI, married the 15-year-old daughter of the Empress of Austria, the French caught a glimpse of the future that seemed hopeful. The young bride, Marie Antoinette, was beautiful and full of life. She instantly changed the mood of the court, which was rank with Louis XV's debaucheries. Even the common people who had yet to see her talked excitedly of Marie Antoinette. The French had grown disgusted with the series of mistresses who had dominated Louis XV, and they looked forward to serving their new queen. In 1773, Marie Antoinette publicly rode through the streets of Paris for the first time, applauding crowds swarming around her carriage. How fortunate, she wrote her mother, to be in a position in which one can gain widespread affection at so little cost. In 1774, Louis XV died and Louis XVI took the throne. As soon as Marie Antoinette became queen, she abandoned herself to the pleasures she loved the most, ordering and wearing the most expensive gowns and jewelry in the realm, sporting the most elaborate hair in history, her sculptured coiffures raising as much as 3 feet above her head, and throwing a constant succession of masked balls and feet. All of these whims paid for on credit, never concerning her with the cost or who paid the bills. Marie Antoinette's greatest pleasure was the creation and designing of a private Garden of Eden at the Petit Trianon, a chateau on the grounds of Versailles with its own woods. The gardens at the Petit Trianon were to be as natural as possible, including moss applied by hand to the trees and rocks. To heighten the pastoral effect, the queen employed peasant milkmaids to milk the finest-looking cows in the realm. Launderers and cheesemakers in special peasant outfits she helped design. Shepherds tend to sheep with silk ribbons around their necks. When she inspected the barns, she would watch her milkmaid squeezing milk into porcelain vases made at the Royal Ceramic Works. To pass the time, Marie Antoinette would gather flowers in the woods around the Petit Trianon or watch her good peasants doing their chores. The place became a separate world, its community limited to her chosen favorites. With each new whim, the cost of maintaining the Petit Trianon soared. Meanwhile, France itself was deteriorating. There was a famine and a widespread discontent. Even socially insulated contours seethed with resentment. The queen treated them like children. Only her favorites mattered, and they were becoming fewer and fewer. But Marie Antoinette did not concern herself with this. Not once throughout her reign did she read a minister's report. Not once did she tour the provinces and rally the people to her side. Not once did she mingle amongst the parishioners or receive a delegation from them. She did none of these things because as queen she felt the people owed her their affection and she was not required to love them in return. In 1784, the queen became embroiled in a scandal as part of an elaborate swindle. The most expensive diamond necklace in Europe had been purchased under her name. And during the swindler's trial, her lavish lifestyle became public. People heard about the money she spent on jewels and dress and masked dances. They gave her the nickname Madame Deficient. And from then on, she became the focus of the people's growing resentment. When she appeared in her box at the opera, the audience greeted her with hisses. Even the court turned against her. For while she had been running up her huge expenditures, the country was headed for ruin. 5 years later, in 1789, an unprecedented event took place, the beginning of the French Revolution. The Queen did not worry. Let the people have their little rebellion, she seemed to think. It would soon quiet down and she would be able to resume her life of pleasure. That year, the people marched on Versailles, forcing the royal family to quit the palace and take residence in Paris. This was a triumph for the rebels, but it offered the queen an opportunity to heal the wounds she had opened and establish contact with the people. The queen, however, had not learned her lesson. Not once would she leave the palace during her stay in Paris. Her subjects could rot in hell for all she cared. In 1792, the royal couple was moved from the palace to a prison as the revolution officially declared the end of the monarchy. The following year, Louis XVI was tried, found guilty, and guillotined. As Marie Antoinette awaited the same fate, hardly a soul came to her defense. Not one of her former friends in the court, not one of Europe's other monarchs, who as members of their own countries' royal families had all the reason in the world to show that revolution did not pay. Not even her own family in Australia, including her brother, who now sat on the throne. She had become the world's pariah. In October of 1793, she finally knelt at the guillotine, unrepentant and defiant to the bitter end. From early on, Marie Antoinette acquired the most dangerous of attitudes. As a young princess in Australia, she was endlessly flattered and cajoled. As the future queen of France court, she was center of everyone's attention. She never learned to charm or please other people, to become attuned to their individual psychologies. She never had to work to get her way, to use calculation or cunning or the art of persuasion. And like everyone who indulged from an early age, she evolved into a monster of insensitivity. From early on, Marie Antoinette acquired the most dangerous of attitudes. As a young princess in Australia, she was endlessly flattered and cajoled. And the future queen Marie Antoinette became the famous of the entire country's dissatisfaction, because it is infuriating to meet with a person who makes no effort to seduce you or attempt to persuade you, even if only for the purpose of deception. And do not imagine that she represents a bygone era or that she is even rare. Her type is today most common than ever. Such types live in their own bubble. They seem to feel they are born kings and queens and that attention is owed them. They do not consider anyone else's nature but bulldoze over people with the self-righteousness, arrogance of Marie Antoinette. Pampered and indulged as children, as adults they still believe that everything must come to them. Convinced of their own charm, they make no effort to charm, seduce, or gently persuade. In the realm of power, such attitudes are disastrous. At all times, you must attend to those around you, gauging their particular psychology, tailoring your words to what you know will entice and seduce them. This requires energy and art. The higher your station, the greater the need to remain attuned to the hearts and minds of those below you, creating a base of support to maintain you at the pinnacle. Without that base, your power will tether, and the slightest change of fortune, those below will gladly assist in your fall from grace. In AD 225, Chuku Lang, master strategist and chief minister to the ruler of Shu in ancient China, confronted a dangerous situation. The kingdom of Wei had mounted an all attack on Shu from the north. More dangerous still, Wei had formed an alliance with the barbarous states to the south of Shu, led by King Mingyo. Chuko Lang had to deal with the second menace from the south before he could hope to fend off Wei in the north. As Shuku Lang prepared to march south against the barbarians, a wise man in his camp offered him advice. It would be impossible, this man said, to pacify the region by force. Lang would probably beat Manchu, but as soon as he headed north again to deal with Wei, Manu would reinvade. It is better to win hearts, said the wise man, than cities. Better to battle with hearts than with weapons. I hope you will succeed in winning the hearts of these people. You read my thoughts, responded Chuku Lang. You read my thoughts. As Lang expected, Ming Ju, who launched a powerful attack, but Lang laid a trap and managed to capture a large part of Ming Ju's army, including the king himself. Instead of punishing and executing his prisoners, however, he separated the soldier from their king and had their shackles removed, regaled them with food and wine, and then addressed them. You are all upright men, he said. I believe you all have parents, wives, and children awaiting you at home. They are doubtless shedding bitter tears at your fate. I am going to release you so that you can return home to your loved ones and comfort them. The men thanked Lang with tears in their eyes. Then he sent for Mingyo. If I release you, asked Lang, what will you do? I will put my army together again, answered the king, and lead it against you to a decisive battle. But if you capture me a second time, I will bow to your superiority. Not only did Lang order Manchu released, he gave him a gift of a horse and a saddle. When angry lieutenants wondered why he did this, Lang told them, I can capture that man as easily as I can take something out of my pocket. I am trying to win his heart. When I do, peace will come of itself here in South. As Ming had said he would, he attacked again, but his own officers, who Lang has treated so well, rebelled against him, captured him, and turned him over to Lang, who asked him again the same question as before. Ming replied he had not beaten fairly, but merely betrayed his own officers, who would fight again, but if captured a third time, he would bow to Lang's superiority. Over the following months, Lang outwitted Ming again and again, capturing him a third, a fourth, and a fifth time. On each occasion, Ming's troops grew more dissatisfied. Lang had treated them with respect, whose troop grew more dissatisfied. Lang had treated them with respect, and they had lost their heart for fighting. But every time Chu Lang asked Ming to yield, the great king would come up with another excuse. You tricked me. I lost through bad luck, on and on. If you capture me again, he would promise, I swear, I will not betray you. And so Lang would let him go. And when he captured Ming for the sixth time, he asked the king, the same question again. If you capture me a seventh time, the king replied, I shall give you my loyalty and never rebel again. Very well, said Lang, but if I capture you again, I will not release you. Now Ming and his soldiers fled to a far corner of their kingdom, the reign of Wug. Defeated so many times, Ming had only one hope left. He would ask the help of King Wutugu of Wug, who had an immense and furious army. Wutugu warrior wore an armor of tightly woven vines soaked in oil, then dried to an impenetrable hardness. When Ming at his side, Wutugu marched this mighty army against Lang, and this time the great strategist seemed frightened, leading his men in a hurried retreat. But he was merely leading Wutu into a trap. He cornered the king's men in a narrow valley, then lit fires set all around them. When the fires reached the soldiers, Wutugu's whole army burst into flames. The oil in their armor, of course, being highly flammable, all of them perished. Lang had managed to separate Ming and his entourage from the carnage in the valley, and the king found himself in a captive for the seventh time. After this slaughter, Lang could not bear to face his prisoner again. He sent a messenger to the captured king. He had commissioned me to release you. Mobilize another army against him if you can, and try once more to defeat him. Sobbing, the king fell to the ground, crawling to Lang on his hands and knees, and prostrated himself at his feet. O great minister, cried Ming, yours is the majesty of heaven. We men of the south would never again offer resistance to your rule. Do you yield? Asked Lang. I, my sons, and my grandsons are deeply moved by your honor, boundless, life-giving mercy. How could we not yield? Lang honored Ming with a great banquet, re-established him on the throne, restored his conquered lands to him, then returned north with his army, leaving no occupying force. Lang never came back, and he had no need to. Ming had become his most devoted and unshakable ally. Shuko Lang had two options: try to defeat the barbarians in the south with one crushing blow, or patiently and slowly win them to his side over time. Most people more powerful than their enemy grab the first option and never consider the second. But the truly powerful think far ahead. The first option may be quick and easy, but over time it brews ugly emotions in the hearts of the vanquished. Their resentment turns to hatred. Such animosity keeps you on edge. You spend your energy protecting what you have gained, growing paranoid and defensive. The second option, though, more important, not only bring you peace of mind, it converts a potential enemy into a pillar of support. In all your encounters, take a step back. Take the time to collaborate and attune yourself to your target's emotional makeup and psychological weaknesses. Force will only strengthen your resistance. With most people, the heart is the key. They are like children ruled by their emotions. To soften them up, alternate harshness with mercy. Play on their basic fears and also their love, freedom, family, etc. Once you break them down, you will have a lifelong friend and fiercely loyal ally. Governments saw men only in mass, but our men, being irregulars, were not formations but individuals. Our kingdoms lay in each man's mind. In the game of power, you are surrounded by people who have absolutely no reason to help you unless it is their interest to do so. And if you have nothing to offer their self-interest, you are likely to make them hostile, for they will see you in just one more competitor, one more waste of their time. Those that overcome this prevailing coldness are the ones who find the key that unlocks the stranger's heart and minds, seducing him into their corners. If necessary, soften him up for a punch. But most people never learn this side of the game. When they meet someone new, Rather than stepping back and probing to see what makes this person unique, they talk about themselves, eager to impose their own willpower and prejudices. They argue, boast, and make a show of their power. They may not know it, but they are secretly creating an enemy, a resistor, because there is no more infuriating feeling to having your individually ignored, your own psychological unacknowledged. It makes you feel lifeless and resentful. Remember, the key to persuasion is softening people up and breaking them down gently. Seduce them with a two-pronged approach. Work on their emotions and play on their intellectual weakness. Be alert to both what separates them from everyone else, their individual psychology, and what they share with everyone else, their basic emotional responses. Aim at the primary emotions: love, hate, jealousy. Once you move their emotions, you have reduced their control, making them more vulnerable to persuasion. When Chu Lane wanted to dissuade an important general of a rival kingdom from entering into an alliance with Taso, Lang dreaded army. He did not detail Seo cruelty or attack him or moral grounds. Instead, Lang suggested that Teo was really after the general's beautiful young wife. This hit the general in the gut and won him over. Mao Tong simply always appealed to popular emotions and spoke in the simplest terms. Educated and well-read himself in his speeches, he used visceral metaphors, voicing the public's deepest anxieties and encouraging them to vent their frustrations in public meetings. Rather than arguing the practical aspects of a particular program, he would describe how it would affect them on the most primitive, down-to-earth level. Do not believe that this approach works only with illiterate and unschooled. It works on one and all. All of us are immortal and face the same dreadful fate, and all of us share the desire for attachment and belonging. Stir up these emotions and you captivate our hearts. The best way to do this is with dramatic jolt of that kind of Chuko Lang, created when he fed and released prisoners who expected only the worst from him. Shaking them to the core, he softened their hearts. Play on contrasts like push people to despair, then give them relief. If they expect pain and you give them pleasure, you win their hearts. Creating pleasure of any kind, in fact, will usually bring you success, as will allaying fears and providing a promising security. Symbolic gestures are often enough to win sympathy and goodwill. A gesture of self-sacrifice, for example, a show that you suffer as those around you do, will make people identify with you, even if your suffering is a symbolic or minor than theirs is real. When you enter a group, make a gesture of goodwill. Soften the group up for a harsher action that will follow later. When T.E. Lawrence was fighting the Turks in the desert of Middle East during World War I, he had an epiphany. It seemed to him that conventional warfare had lost its value. The old-fashioned soldier was lost in enormous armies of the time, in which he was ordered about like a lifeless pawn. Lawrence wanted to turn this around. For him, every soldier mind was a kingdom, and he had to conquer. A committed psychologically motivated soldier would fight harder and more creatively than a puppet. Lawrence's perception is still more true in the world today, where so many of us feel alienated, anonymous, and suspicious of authority, all of which makes overt power plays and force even more counterproductive and dangerous. Instead of manipulating lifeless pawns, make those on your side convinced and excited by the cause you have enlisted them in. This will not make your work easier, but it will give you more leeway to deceive them later on. And to accomplish this, you need to deal with their individual psychologies. Never clumsily assume that the tactic that worked on one person will necessarily work on the other. To find the key that will motivate them, first get them to open up. The more they talk, the more they reveal about their likes and dislikes, the handles and levers to move them with. The quickest way to secure people's minds is by demonstrating as simply as possible how an action will benefit them. Self-interest is the strongest motivation of all. A great cause may capture minds, but once the first flush of excitement is over, interest will flag unless there is something to be gained. Self-interest is the soldier's foundation. The cause that works best use a noble veneer to cover a blatant appeal to self-interest. The cause seduces, but the self-interest secures the deal. The person who are best at appealing to people's minds are often artists, intellectuals, and those of a more poetic nature. This is because ideas are more easily communicated through metaphors and imaginary. It is always good policy then to have in your pocket at least one artist or intellectual who can appeal concretely to people's minds. Kings have always kept a stables of writers in their barn. Frederick the Great had his Voltaire until they quarreled and separated. Napoleon won over Goth. Conversely, Napoleon III alienation of writers such as Victor Hugo, whom he exiled from France, contributed his growing unpopularity and eventual downfall. It is dangerous then to alienate those who have powers of expression and useful to pacify and exploit them. Finally, learn to play the numbers game. The wider your support base, the stronger your power, understanding that one alienated, disaffected soul can spark a blaze of discontent. Louis XIV made sure to endeavor himself and the lowest members of his staff. You too must constantly win over more allies on all levels. A time will inevitably come when you will need them. The keyhole. People build walls to keep you out. Never force your way in. You will find only more walls within walls. There are doors in these walls, doors to the heart and mind, and they have tiny keyholes. Peer through the keyholes, find the key that opens the door, and you have access to their will with no ugly signs of forced entry. The difficulties in the way of persuasion lie in my knowing the heart of the persuaded in order thereby to fit my words into it. For this reason, whoever attempts persuasion before the throne must carefully observe the sovereign feelings of love and hate, his secret wishes and fears, before he can conquer his heart. There is no possible reverse of this law.